Hi, welcome to Bulwark on Sunday Live. I'm Bill Kristol, joined by my colleague Tim Miller. A special treat today. I'm going to miss Tim's podcast. Tomorrow morning was on a plane somewhere, so he'll have an upgrade from me. But I'm upgrading to Tim, so it's working out fine.
Bulwark on Sunday. That was an appropriate slip there. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, Bulwark on Sunday. Yeah, why not? What? Don't work on Sunday? You think that's what I said? Yeah.
Bulwark, like Bill
Kristol.
Oh,
Bulwark. I don't work. I don't know. It's hard to keep track. Who's your guest tomorrow?
SE Cup will be on tomorrow, and she is as filled with righteous rage about JD Vance and Donald Trump and Elon Musk abandoning our allies in Ukraine as I am, and so I'm excited to hash it out with her.
I look forward to watching that. What to talk about? Let's begin with Ukraine. You did a wonderful very interesting podcast with a young man I hadn't heard of, but you knew or knew of anyway.
We never met, but I'd been following him on social media for a while. I nerd out on the Twitter Ukraine stuff and some lists, and he had a documentary that I'd watched a couple years ago, and when I woke up on, I guess, what was it, Friday morning, and there had been a lot of reports from Zelensky himself, et cetera, about the bombings. I just thought it'd be valuable for people to hear from somebody that's actually there. And I mean, the points that he was making was pretty alarming. He said that in Kyiv, there'd been air-raid silence from time to time still over the past few months, but like not that often. He said they're going off all night. I'm getting my time zones wrong. I forget if that was Thursday into Friday or Friday into Saturday, and then again the next night. He did say, we've been texting, he did say it was a little quieter last night. The other thing that was, I think, most noteworthy of the conversation is just the amount of material that was getting through, right? And so I think that this just ties directly to the most important and most shameful action so far of this administration, which is the ending the intelligence sharing. Because with U.S. intelligence, the Ukrainians have done a very good job of blocking a lot of the bombs and drones, et cetera, particularly the older bombs that were breaking through. They also kind of had a good awareness on where the Russian lines were, and he was pointing out that some of their units were like coming out of hiding, essentially, right, because they'd been essentially pinned down because we knew where they were, and so just the ramifications of it are massive, and I think I guess it hasn't gotten worse in the sense that was the most acute night of bombing, but just as far as our posture towards them has gotten worse. I've been reading things are serious, and you're back to reading the Institute for the Study of War briefings, right? And they are pointing out that outside of Kyiv in the east, the bombardments have really increased, and you got the Polish. I forget, it wasn't the prime minister, the Polish defense minister, one of the Polish ministers, like getting into a fight with Elon and Marco on social media. I mean, over Starlink, and it's ugly right now.
Yeah, the intelligence cutoff, just for me, first of all, people should watch that or listen to that podcast, or at least read the transcript. It's really interesting and moving. And this young man is over there. And where's he from originally? I can't even remember. Ireland, yeah. And reminds one of the kind of human what's at stake. It's depressing. The intelligence cutoff, I do think, is another level of pro-Putinism. Not committing to further aid, not committing to NATO membership. Some of that Biden had been ambivalent on the NATO side. The further aid, they maybe don't need it right now, so you could resolve that in a month or two. The intelligence in real time, cutting off the intelligence, that's just pro-Putin. I mean, I don't even see how you can say it's anything else, right? It just helps him fight the war, kill more Ukrainians.
No, it's what everybody says. I mean, look, if you're on these kind of Ukrainian military feeds, it's just like that has been the most dramatic, real result. And I mean, Zelensky's tweeted a couple of these examples, but there are more of, just mass bombing. They're going after infrastructure, but people getting injured. There was one case, one instance in particular, where the Russians bombed a factory. The first aid team, first responders came in to kind of help deal with it. Then they bombed the same spot again. Just horrific stuff. The kind of stuff that was happening at the beginning of the war that was still happening, but that had been tapered by the Ukrainian defense. So this is the whole thing. It's just like we are doing it for not what I guess. I forget who I was talking to this about on Friday, but and the only argument that you have is is just to say that like they are trying to pressure Zelensky to the negotiating table so that he can surrender, right? Like what is the other rationale for this, right? Like besides they want it to get worse, so he feels pressured to negotiate on their terms, and so I mean that again like just puts you squarely on the side of Russia.
Yeah, or they just want to, you know, destroy Ukrainian morale. I mean, that double tap that they've used in Syria and elsewhere. You
Right.
attack a civilian target, then you attack the people who are in the emergency teams
Right.
coming to help the wounded, and it's a horrible thing. Obviously, maybe it breaks morale, maybe it doesn't, but they also kill people, which they seem to want to do. I mean, it is just brutal,
Yeah. And
and
then you have JD Vance complaining that Ukraine protesters were shouting at his daughter. I don't know
yeah,
if you saw this. He's like tweeting, complaining that, and if you looked at the video, they were totally appropriate in what they were doing in the protests. But, somebody had sent this video of a 3-year-old girl in Ukraine that had like lost a leg that's walking. And it's like, I'm sorry. Okay. Like if you want to abandon a free people that are being attacked, then like you're going to get criticized for it. And I'm sorry that you were on a walk with your child, but like there are actually people dying and being injured because of it. And in that exchange, I watched the full video on the Cincinnati TV stations put it up. Like the most interesting part of just like listening to him off the cuff is one of the women who was protesting was like Russia has a history of this. It was Crimea. It was, and it's kind of muffled what else she mentions. But then she's like, then Ukraine, they're always the aggressor. Like they're always the one that's responsible. And JD says basically like, well, that's your opinion. Like you can't even acknowledge, even in like these private exchanges, that, like Russia does anything wrong. And like meanwhile, Marco Rubio's shit posting the Polish. Like it's a very dark situation.
it's horrible. And I mean, I don't care about the JD man. I mean, it's not worth getting into at great length, but
Yeah,
it
sure.
looks like the Secret Service. I worked for a vice president. I have some familiarity with how this might work. So he wants to go to his home as opposed to the vice president's residence here, which he lives at the Naval Observatory for the weekend with his family. I suppose that's fine in Cincinnati. And they've got the street pretty well blocked off, though. The protesters are not outside his door, right? They're, I don't know what, a block away, I'd say it looks like on the video. I
It's
mean,
like,
and he wants to walk his 3-year-old, which is fine, obviously.
yeah.
And he could walk around in many ways without approaching the protesters. He wants to kind of have a bit of a confrontation with them, or maybe let's be nice and say he wants to talk to the public. And then he gets all offended because these people are not willing to tell him that it's not a terrible thing they're doing to cut off the aid to Ukraine.
Right. I mean, there is no. I mean, it's Calvin Ball. There's nothing that they could have done.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing was just him wanting to play the victim. Meanwhile, he's responsible for just this horrific turn on on the ground in Ukraine.
Ugh. Anything to be done about it? I mean, do you find that Democrats who you talk to think it's conceivable that, I mean, this is an issue which half the Republicans voted to aid Ukraine less than a year ago, including the Speaker of the House, in a rather eloquent speech, actually. I went back and looked at it for a minute about how important this was, and it was a morally right and just cause and so forth. I don't know. Is anyone going to do anything about this? Or
I mean, I don't think anyone's going to do anything, but I do think this is an issue that is worth, everybody's kind of tired of like, shame Republicans, like do the right thing, because we all know they're never going to do the right thing. But I do think this is an issue where so many of them have public statements like that, as you mentioned, and Mike Johnson's, that are eloquent, that are passionate, that are committed to like the Ukrainian cause. I mean, that Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, is saying that he would do everything that he could to defend Ukraine. Don Bacon's on 6 Minutes. So like you've seen this, even Thune back in the day, like Thune and Johnson both have said that. So I do think shaming them and just at least on the intelligence thing, being like, they're like, you have power. Like these Republicans have power now. If they want to, they have a big budget vote that's coming up this week, right? And if you want to protect the Ukrainians, you could just say to the White House, like, I'm not going to vote for your budget unless you turn the intel back on and we start working with Ukraine. Like they could say that's not a crazy ask, given the severity of the situation. I don't have any expectation any of them will do it, but I think it's a pretty simple message and it's worth, at least humiliating them on.
It is, and I feel like you're just shouting into the wind at this point, obviously on the Republicans on the Hill. But I feel like there's a little different they are way other issues they haven't opined on one way or the other, or they're vaguely in favor of cutting government, so they're not going to take on Doge even when it's terrible, or they'll take it on in the way some of them are, which is they'll protect their districts. So Tom Cole's very proud that in Oklahoma, 3 things have been reopened. I mean, it's fine. He represents Oklahoma, but he is also in the leadership of the House Republicans. Maybe he could represent the country a little bit, But on Ukraine, I think it's foreign policy. People don't care, but it's sort of the opposite. I think of all the issues, it's the one. Many Republicans have been to Kyiv. They've spent a fair amount of time, to be fair to them, learning about it, thinking about how to help them best, criticizing the Biden administration for not doing enough. The Mike McCalls of the world, former the Republican former chairman, I guess, of House Foreign Affairs, people like that. And just the idea that they can't. And what would it take? 3 of them. 3 of them. Have to say what you said. You know what? We can't. Maybe it takes a few more of some Democrats to fact, but not really.
Yeah.
Right? We can't support the Republican budget unless we're not even asking you to change the overall orientation. We're not asking you to change on NATO involvement. We're not asking for everything here. We're
not asking for more funds. We're not even asking for more military material. It's like we're just asking that we continue our alliance with the Ukrainian victim.
Provide them intelligence that saves lives. And it does save lives, incidentally. Yeah. That's what it does. It doesn't necessarily even change the course of the war, honestly. If we're going to cut off the aid, they're going to have trouble. Anyway, the Europeans will or won't step up, et cetera. This is, I'm going to, maybe I'll write about that tomorrow morning in Morning Chats. It's so good. I was thinking about Ukraine anyway, but it's so simple. And it sounds so simple-minded to say, 3 of them or 6 of them or something could just say that. It's not that hard, right? Well, it's hard because
there's many more than 6 of them that privately hold that view, I guess is the other point. Totally. Right? And so, it's not like it's a request that is outside of what they would prefer.
Right. It's like, give up a huge part of your agenda, or whatever it is. He didn't run on cutting off intelligence in real time to Ukraine in the first or second week of March, right? And that was not. Right. I mean, he was never going to be pro-Ukraine the way others might have been, but depressing.
Extremely.
Meanwhile, on the domestic front, what strikes you about what's going on with the Justice Department and everything else? So Doge. Musk-Rubio fight, that I've ignored. I think you may have paid more attention to that.
Let's just because that's funny, because we went to such a dark place. I think it's worth enjoying it. If you haven't read the Times piece, I think it was Swan and Haberman on this White Oval Office meeting between Trump and Musk and Rubio and Duffy. And I said online, I was like, I think this is like a reverse Portlandia. There's a show, Portlandia, that like spoofs all like the progressive, no verbiage and silliness of progressive meetings. This was like a reverse of that. Like you have a reality TV show star and a rich billionaire and like a guy who used to be a normal Republican, and they're all arguing, and like their arguments are just not even sensible. Like Duffy, actually, the reality show star, is the one making the most sensible argument, which is like, I need more FAA officials. Like Elon can't fire them, just fire them randomly. Then Elon's like, oh no, we were just filing the DEI FAA people. It's like, it must have been DEI that was the problem. It's like, what are you even talking about? And then Trump chimes in and he's like, he's saying, well, what you should really do is replace the DEI people with some MIT grads, and put them in the FAA. It's just like, I mean, how much is an FAA person making? $160,000? Like, you think that MIT people are getting that? Like, it's just, the whole thing just shows a total disconnect with the reality of how the government works. And it's really alarming. Like and that's the funny part, but like the Atlantic, Isaac Stanley Becker has a piece today about just how, about how the FAA staffing situation is worse than we realize. And here we have just like the Keystone Cops shouting about DEI in the Oval Office. It's telling. The other thing about the exchange that was interesting is Trump did have to bleat. Everything is good with Musk and Marco. Like they are not in a fight. That is fake news. So it's always a sign of real news when Trump has to tweet that something is fake news.
I thought that was actually like a fake tweet. I mean, I thought that was like a joke, a parody tweet.
All right.
It's so comical that Trump in caps is saying there's not after this fight is reported on quite reliably, the principals don't really deny it, right? I mean, I don't think Trump has to say, they're getting along great, because Elon's an easy guy to get along with, and it's amazing Rubio found some spirit there. But anyway, it's a disconnect with reality, but also just a disdain and contempt for reality. Like actually, FAA people are helping planes land safely and
Right.
fly safely. It's kind of important, you know.
Yeah.
And if it takes X number of people, it takes X number of people. It's a tiny, trivially small investment in a country that's flying billions of passengers. I don't even know how many,
Yeah.
right? And then millions of flights, and making that system as safe as possible. And the idea that you're going to fire we're getting tough, we're cutting that bloated FAA. I mean, it's so farcical. Maybe there are particular people who could be moved and stuff, but that's not
Sure.
what they're doing. That's not what they're doing. Someone in government pointed out, if I could take a second on the DEI thing, someone in government made a point to me. Someone who's in an agency and is in DEI world and is not sympathetic to it particularly. But a lot of the people who are working in DEI, they were just assigned there. I mean, it's not like if you're in government, like in any corporation, right? It's like you don't get to choose exactly what you work on. And someone say, we need some people to do this. Go do this for a year. Then we'll bring you back to or move you to a next job, which is the one you've wanted in,
Right.
something else. I'm making this up, obviously, enforcement. And I'm making it up, but I'm not making it up in the sense that this really happens. And the person went there for a year because his or her boss told him to. And then suddenly they're like DEI agents hostile to American principles and they're fired. It's really insane.
It's totally insane. And you kind of went over the Tom Cole thing, but I haven't had a chance to talk about that.
Well, go ahead, talk about it.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy, right? Like you have this Oklahoma congressman, this old line Republican, like tweeting about how he saved these 3 things in Oklahoma from Doge. And like the whole thing just betrays how ridiculous it all is and how capricious it is. And, it's like, okay, well, if you don't have somebody like Tom Cole, if you have a MAGA member who doesn't actually care about his district, then you're boned. If you have one of those veterans hospitals, if you have a Democrat, right, you're boned. If you have one of these Social Security offices, like it's just an insane way to run the business. And I don't know, I don't know if you saw it. Stacey Abrams was on Chris Hayes trying to defend her program.
I heard about it. I read your tweet about it.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the program. All I know is I watched her explanation and it made it worse rather than better. And so I just pointed that out. I was like, Democrats, people just genuinely, including Democrats, by the way, including this was a big initiative of Clinton Gore, like people genuinely don't like when there's just obviously waste and corruption. I don't know if it was either of those things for Stacey, but it surely didn't seem like it was useful. And, I had these guys like, oh, now you get it. Now you're pro Doge, like replying to me. And I'm like, no, like you guys, like this is not complicated, right? Like we can review programs, we can streamline things. God knows every organization could use that. But like what is happening here is inhumane. I liked your boy Al Green's comment on this. Maybe that can get us into Al Green. Al Green was talking about how it was just inhumane. Like you're not treating people with dignity and you're not being serious about it. Like it is just, and like that's the part that is awful.
Yeah. And Tom Cole, I think, is chairman of House Appropriations. He had been chairman of House Rules. He's a very senior member and has been sort of the establishment wing, you might say, of the Speaker Johnson group. And if he thinks it's wrong to close VA hospitals, he should stop them from closing everywhere, at least until there's a thorough review and so forth. Right. And the same with Social Security officers or whatever else he saved in Oklahoma. It's really irresponsible, actually. He literally is going to sign off on a budget that's going to allow these things to continue to be closed, right?
Yes. That's what they're working on this week. Crazy.
What do you think of the budget stuff? I haven't followed it as closely as I should have.
I don't know. I'm interested. I do wonder if, like, the fact that things are going bad for them, just objectively, might make the House Republicans more likely to just be like, okay, like we'll just do a clean budget here and I'm not going to stir up trouble right now because like we already have enough trouble out there. But who knows, right? I mean, it is. It's a ridiculous budget, as if you are talking about cutting the deficit and debt, right? I mean, even the most friendly assessment of it, I think, by one of the MAGA economists had like $890 million increase, and it's going to be much more than that. It does have the Medicaid and Medicare cuts, and they haven't specifically said what they are, but it's from this bucket that there's no other. There's no other program that has that level of funding. And so it just like, it's going to have to come from Medicare or Medicaid. And so I don't know. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I would have said I think that they shut this thing down. But now like Elon's kind of shutting the government down ad hoc. and maybe they don't feel like they need to fight it right now. But it will just kind of depend on, you're asking me to get inside the brain of Chip Roy. Like it's going to depend on like the brain of like these couple random people. Are they going to want to stand by their, commitment to cuts, or a handful of people in the center, which I have no hope for, going to stand by their opposition to Medicaid cuts?
I mean, I feel like it sounds like there's some momentum behind this quote clean CR, continuing resolution for the rest of the year. It's not really clean. That's another question. And maybe Democrats can expose some of the actual kind of hidden cuts there, but that's different, of course, from the actual reconciliation bill that has, I think, the $180 billion and all this, which coming up soon. I mean, they do have a pretty heavy lift, just as a kind of, even in normal circumstances.
They do. The reconciliation bill will be, so it's worth mentioning both these things. The reconciliation bill on some levels will be easier because, you only need 50 in the Senate. But on another way, it's going to be much harder.
It's what builds in the Medicaid cuts. I mean, the CR is just the CR, So.
Exactly. So we'll have the details and the devil's going to be in the details and this stuff. The other thing I should have mentioned about this continuing resolution, though, is you do need Democrats on this one in the Senate. Right. So this is a little bit of a different calculation. I've had gone round and around many times about how Democrats should not be supporting a clean CR in the House because make Mike Johnson govern. In the Senate, because of the filibuster, they do actually need 60. From my interview with Fetterman, which was not exactly encouraging, to me, it seemed like he's going to be for keeping the government open. So, but you're going to need 6 other Democrats. So that it might end up like that part of this might get a little hinky.
Now, that could be pretty interesting. Well, since we're talking transition down to the Democrats, so to speak, you mentioned, quote, my man Al Green. I don't know. I just woke up Friday morning and I was so annoyed by all that. When at first it got censored, and I was actually kind of moved to see them singing "We Shall Overcome" there in the well of the House, and Mike Johnson ineffectually trying to gavel them and having to then quiet and then shutting the House. And then I went back and looked at the little video I didn't watch the State of the Union, but of Green interrupting, and everyone's being so high and mighty. Oh my God, decorum and respect for the presidency. And some Democrat even said it was something about, I have a deep reverence for the presidency. You're not supposed to have reverence for the office of the president. He's the president. He's elected. You should respect him. You probably shouldn't routinely do what Al Green did, but it was kind of an extraordinary moment. Anyway, so I went by slightly over the top morning shots Friday morning defending Al Green, and then there was various huffing and puffing. But then reading this weekend, there's what I want to ask you about. The various Democrats hand wringing and worrying, we can't look this, we can't seem at all angry because that would be terrible, and we have to look very calm and cool and collected. I thought, what do we do? I'm in the pro Al Green mode, but.
No, it's funny though. I forget who wrote it, so I'm sorry for not shouting you out. But there was like another Substack post where somebody's like the dividing lines on the left right now in the pro democracy movement are not really ideological, and they're more about like tactical and what posture to take. And they're like, you got Al Green and AOC and Bill Kristol that are like, we should be more aggressive. So those are your new partners in crime there. But I count me in that bunch. I think things are very bad. I think that there are 100 different things that you could rant and rave about right now. I do not think that these people should be given any quarter. I don't think that they should be treated in the way that they would never treat Democrats. I think that there's risk associated with that. I've been joking on the pod. I'm like, every time I'm like, the Dems should do more, Dems go do something. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that. So there's risk associated with all that, but I don't think that much. I think a lot of this stuff is a conversation. I guess my main point is this. A lot of these tactical conversations are a little bit of fart sniffing among a bunch of people who are hyper engaged in politics.
Totally.
And they have different views, and some views are better than others. But like the only people that are even aware of their views or their tactics are people that read the Morning Shots or Politico Playbook or the Punch Bowl newsletter, right? And in order to reach other people that are not political junkies, in order to break through in the fucking algorithms that they are consuming, the only way to do that is to try to play on Trump and Elon's turf and to use really highly emotional and passionate appeals and talk about things that regular people are interested in And, maybe there's a trickle down. I also don't know that who cares. Like, we're also very far away from the election, but like, that's like my basic view. It's just like, it's a lot of conversation around what we should do that is focused on what a bunch of people who are already in the tent think, and a bunch of people who are already in the tent read. And we appreciate all the people that are already in the tent reading us. But like, from a strategic standpoint, it is not incumbent on me to not talk about something on the podcast because it's not politically salient for the Democrats, whatever. It's like the people that are listening to my podcast have a pretty developed view, right? And I think that like the Democrats should just think about how to come and use the people that listen to our podcast as like an army of their own to kind of go post their own things and get out into their communities. I think that's useful. And I think they should think about how to get outside of the bubble. So to me, the Al Green thing was fine. It was a net plus. I don't think it's, whatever, going to be the memorable moment of Iwo Jima. There won't be a statue of him or anything, but I think more like that, less timidity.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they also have Alyssa Slotkin giving a good response afterwards, which I like. I like Alyssa, and so that's fine. You can do both. I mean, this is where they're also wrapped around the axle. It's a big opposition. You want a big opposition movement. You want a big opposition party, but really more than a party, a movement, which I will incessantly say they should use more non-politicians to convey their messages. In that respect, people watching this are often going to be better messengers scattered around the country who know a lot about what these cuts are doing to their communities, are better messengers than some 20-year Democratic politician. But it's also good to have Alyssa Slotkin give a thoughtful response, and good for Al Green to show some righteous indignation. I don't think the idea that this is hurting voters or damaging the Democratic brand, no one cares about the Democratic brand right now. There's no election except in Virginia and New Jersey and New York City, I guess, until November 2026. Whatever the Democratic brand will be, it'll be the candidates who show up and what the issues of 2026 are and so forth. But for now, I think energizing people who like Al Green while reassuring people who like Alyssa Slotkin, you can do both. The party is a big party. They're too much think that they have to control it all. My experience, having been on the other side of this a little bit in government, it helped the Democrats when they were in opposition to the Republican administrations I was part of, or to the Bush administration, which I was mostly friendly to. It helped the Democrats to have a lot of different voices, actually.
Yeah.
It helped to have the kind of troublemakers and indignant people and then the kind of sober, oh no, we're going to govern in a responsible way. They got the best of both worlds in some ways. I mean, so I very much object to the kind of pretending the election is tomorrow, so they have to, quote, control the message, A, and B, that the politicians matter more than the people, if I can put it that way. Yeah, and C, this notion that they can't have more than one voice or attitude, or the one attitude might be reasonable for something, for some set of issues, and another for different kind of issues. Al Green's constituents are going to be hurt by this budget. He's allowed to say that,
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit on the phone, but like my view is, like one thing that's missing is the void we're filling, I guess, is like we could use some people in the Democratic Party that are moderate in policy, but radical in temperament and tactics, that's fine. And by the way, I think as I always say, I think the Democrats should have a populist left part of the party. To your point, like you got to appeal to a lot of different people. But I was annoyed about the censure vote, like the types of politicians that I would like the most in the Democratic Party, Glusenkamp Perez, Moskowitz, right? Like they were the ones that were, saying we should play nice and hold hands and voting to censure Al Green. And I don't know, we could use, everybody's talking about how the left needs a Rogan. I want the center left to have an AOC, like somebody with some fucking balls, like she has.
That's a good formulation. I may have to steal that too. I don't know.
Keep stealing it. I'm your muse. I don't have to write anymore.
No, it's good. No, you're.
Will you? Before we go, one of the other things we want to talk about that I want you to rant about is the DOJ stuff, because I skipped over that and what they're targeting Perkins Coal, et cetera, because I do think it's really alarming.
I mean, just the degree to which the degree of politicization. I mean, it's so beyond the kind of marginal stuff that Bush tried to do a little bit with Roe, with the U.S. attorneys, some stuff that I guess the Obama administration did. But again, I mean, you have Ed Martin, this, I guess, acting now, was the interim U.S. attorney for D.C., very important job, just doing stuff that people couldn't have believed. I mean, really you pick it up and you think this is maybe Hungary, or maybe a little worse than Hungary. I mean, it's probably not worse, but it's more dramatic. It's more dramatic to see it suddenly here. Hungary is a little more gradual, perhaps, in the way they went in this direction. targeting the law firms, targeting, no due process, no nothing, executive orders. Again, one thing, Ed Martin to do something, okay, he's an irresponsible jackass who's DC, the U.S. Attorney for DC. The EO, the executive order targeting Perkins Coie, I think it's pronounced, the law firm, was signed by the president. That's a presidential executive order targeting one law firm. For what? For representing Hillary Clinton, commissioning a study, which may or may not have been perfect at the time. The people who did it happened to have left the firm, but they didn't leave in disrepute. It's just what law firms do. And sometimes the studies they commission aren't 100% accurate. It was actually more accurate than people think now, but that's a whole nother debate. I guess they settled one case of, I can't remember, some charge against them, which I'm sure every law firm has done in the last 10 years. And they have some internal DEI procedures, which again, every law firm basically, at least in Washington and New York and so forth, had over the last bunch of years. And for that, they're supposed to They lose people there lose security clearances. They don't have access to the government officials are instructed by Trump not to deal with them. Basically, if I'm not mistaken, maybe they can't get into government buildings. Who knows how much of this stays up in court? But I was on one thread with some lawyers, and there's a lot of we got to stand in solidarity with them, which is good. And I think they're a great firm. They can survive that. They can fight back. It's good that they're going to fight back. And someone else said, "Look, this is damaging." I mean, to them, this is where you can't be complacent about this. If you're a corporate CEO and you're thinking, you have a whole bunch of cases and possible cases and negotiations with the U.S. government, which most big corporations do, probably. Yeah. Can you hire a law firm or keep a law firm as your main legal representative who the president of the United States has ordered cabinet officers not to deal with? You got to kind of owe it to your shareholders to get someone who can get in the door and make your case. So this could well damage that firm, especially if the other law firms don't show solidarity, which I'm not sure if they will. It isn't there. I think there's a piece today I haven't read yet. I've got in the Times, maybe a journal, something about how there's not a lot of solidarity so far to either Perkins or to Covington. So, which is previously targeted. Again, the degree of authoritarianism, the degree of purposeful targeting, of trying to shape outside things. It's one thing to ruin the government and shape the government to do huge damage to government institutions. They're now trying to shape all the institutions on the periphery of the government or outside the government, in business world and civil society and so forth. And that is real authoritarianism, right? It's not just authoritarian government. You try to create an authoritarian society.
Yeah, no, this is just another one of those examples, kind of the political we were talking about earlier, which is this is so alarming. Obviously, white shoe DC lawyers are not going to be the sympathetic victim here that you run a campaign on, but it is extremely scary and alarming to have like the federal government individually targeting law firms, limiting people's ability to get good representation. There's only so many law firms that have expertise and security clearances and all this kind of stuff. I just think it's a big deal.
And the white shoe guys may not be sympathetic, but a lot of what they're also being targeted for now, it looks like, is doing pro bono work for poor immigrants and for poor, victims of police brutality or any other liberal cause, just a decency cause, I'd say, that the Trump administration doesn't like. Whoever steps up to help the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, that Trump and Vance are going to want to throw out. I mean, they're going to be targeted. So it does really have an effect on pro bono work and on sort of legal representation and advocacy for groups throughout society, not just for the corporation that has to, that's representing its presumably kind of, it's not such a sympathetic figure. So,
right.
Okay, that's
great chat. Thanks for doing this.
An appropriately slightly worried and dire note to end on. Thank you for joining me today here Sunday, Tim, and I look forward to seeing you in SC Cup Monday and then resuming things with you a week from Monday.
All right, sounds good. See you later, Bill.
Thanks. Thank you all for joining us.
Hey, YouTube fam, if you want to support the Bulwark, the best way to do it is by becoming a YouTube Bulwark Plus member. The Bulwark is truly independent. We have no corporate overlords. We're not settling any dumb lawsuits with Trump. By joining, you help support our work, and you can get a bunch of perks right here on this platform. Ad-free content, bonus videos, live streams, and some emojis of me, which I guess some people want. So come join, come hang out, become a Bulwark YouTube Plus member, and I'll be seeing you in the comments. So behave.